Welcome to One Belly Wednesday. This week, what we're going to be talking about is a little bit longer conversation. We're going to be showing our One Belly Wednesday this week a bit of a preview, but our longer form of this is going to be something that we're going to be sharing with our bigger community, where we're going to sit and talk a little bit about our first trimester journey. It's something that a lot of parents don't really get the opportunity to talk about, because one of the things that I always even say in my own practice is that we throw a party at 12 weeks because most miscarriages will happen before 12 weeks. And so it seems like it's one of those things that when you find out the joy of, hey, look, we're expecting, a lot of people have a tendency to keep that close to the vest. And one of the things that Dr. Danielle and I decided when we found out that we were expecting, what we wanted to do was be more vocal about our first trimester. And we've had some circumstances that haven't really let us do that. And so we want to take this opportunity to kind of go back through some of our feelings, some of the ways that fears or happiness, all the whole gamut of the journey that is what the first trimester is, and also maybe give some of you guys some resources and some understanding from another couple that can empathize with where you're at with that journey. And so I think the first thing to talk about is basically what our preparation was. Mm-hmm. We talk about how pregnancy and fertility is a byproduct of health. It's Dr. Marcia Schaefer's quote, and it's something. The protocols that we use in our office has been something I just do in my life anyway. But you started up with that what?
It was right after our seminar, so second week in February.
Okay.
When the products came in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so by the time that we found out we were expecting, again, it was a happy surprise. It wasn't necessarily something that we had planned for later.
Right.
But when we did find out, right? I mean, you showed me 5 pregnancy tests.
So many. Yes. Yeah. A bunch of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things too, right? Like you wake up. Because you're an early riser, and you're like,
right, and especially early at the time that I was waking up. So 4:33 was the time I was up most every morning, and this morning I was up a little after 3:30. So yeah, I think the first test that I took was at 3:37. I had written down and taken a picture of it, like that looks like a faint line on there, and I wasn't necessarily late in my cycle yet. Too, it was just kind of that feeling. I don't know if any of you have had that. I'm just going to do this out of a curiosity thing. Just had a few tests laying around. So I would say to ease my mind, but it wouldn't have been bad either way.
Yeah.
It was just a surprise that when I took the test, there was a faint line there.
Mm-hmm.
So I took another. There. I waited patiently the painstaking 3.5 hours until the stores opened so I could go get even more tests. Yeah, right when they opened.
Remember when you showed them to me? You said, "Is this a line?" And I go, "Yeah, it was."
That is a line.
Yeah. And then even we had a seminar together. I drove up to Daytona to take the Webster class. Mm-hmm. We've taken that multiple times, but we wanted to do that together and have a conversation. This was our first actual conversation because Danielle is living in South Carolina and I'm down here in Florida, and to say, so how are we with this, right?
Yeah. Right.
And looking at those lines getting darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
Every successive test.
Right.
Yep, still pregnant.
Yeah.
This is even more pregnant. Really pregnant.
Right. Again, this one says the word pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's not even just the line.
Yeah.
So how do we adapt to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so then, our plans kind of get set in motion, just like any couple that has to figure out how to make it work. Figured out, well, what does it look like for moving down here? What are we going to do with our relationship? What does this look like for our kids? Because Danielle has a daughter, Phoenix, who we both love and adore, and a son, Forrest, who we both love and adore. How do we make our families now this blended family? We kind of went instantly from families of 1 child to families of 3.
Yeah.
So
1 to 3.
Yeah.
In a blink.
Instant blending into a van.
Right.
So,
yes, my car will no longer work.
Yeah, that car's not going to three-seat across. No, don't think the Jeep's going to be able to do that either. So,
yeah.
Yeah, and it's also been difficult with the distance too, and family situations. Being apart during these times as well. And so I've at least shared this that I feel like some of that we've worked really hard not to let this time be taken from us. That when we are together to really focus in on the joys that we have. I remember our first midwife appointment and just how excited we both were for drive up to Kristen's and to all the confirmation and affirmations of things. And we aren't telling people what we're having as far as a sex reveal for the baby, but we know. And so the days that we found that out, I was getting my hair cut, and Danielle told me that the email's here. I'm not opening it, but I need you on the phone right now. And I just sent it to you, and you got to open it. So I left with the thing still on me. My hair's like half done. Yes. Go outside. And I open it and I read, greater than 99.9% sure that this is definitely your guy's baby, and it is a baby. And man, I was just reading that, screen sharing it on Zoom, and I was so happy. And then to go out and have that kind of moment. We know a lot of couples too during this time with the great pause aren't necessarily with each other the way that they usually would be. We can't necessarily share things with families in the way that they have. There's been a lot of COVID pregnancies, and so we're like right in the thick of all that too. And what was the hardest, I think, for me in this is when you weren't feeling well and not being with you to help.
Right. Yeah. That was tough. And it felt like for me too, once it all kind of settled in that I was pregnant, because there is, from a woman's perspective, such a period of time where you know that you are, but you don't have the physical stuff to prove it necessarily yet. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I never really felt it until I had a belly and I felt movement. But then with this, it was within a few days after I found out that I was pregnant, I felt very sick and I felt very uncomfortable. Not necessarily like the throwing up kind of sick, but just like the feeling of almost like I had a really bad hangover, which is not the way that you want to feel ever, let alone the way that you want to feel from the time you wake up, which is at its worst until the time you go to sleep, until 2 or 3 weeks ago. So that, and great to have that empathy now with moms who have talked to me about that, but not something I want to go through again if I could avoid that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we found some things that seemed to be helpful. Making sure that your vitamin D levels were good, your oxygen wasn't awesome at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's really bad. And so our midwife recommended something that we call it Nora tea. So it's nettles, red raspberry leaf, and alfalfa. And it basically tastes like if you fall face first, mouth open in a barn. That's a lot of what this tastes like. Taste and smell. It is very earthy, and but really good for also regulating blood sugar and helping with the oxygenation of your cells. And so fairly shortly after doing that, I know that I started noticing that the color was coming back. Seemed to have more energy too. So that was good.
Yeah, very helpful. Very even more helpful when you can put things in it.
Yeah, right.
So it doesn't taste just like barn.
Yeah.
That's helpful too.
What are the things that they've been, I know that you talked with Allison about it too. She had some tips.
For what to put in the tea itself. Peppermint was a great one. Also refrigerating it and not necessarily letting it stay room temperature all the time when you're drinking it is very helpful. And I put lime or lemon in it as well. And that's really nice too.
Someone said ginger maybe for some people.
Ginger?
They might like that.
Yeah.
It's going to depend. I mean, first trimester is notorious for smells and tastes being really heightened.
Right.
So experiment with what you have, what you can tolerate, for sure. The next piece too is the things that we've been doing that have been a little bit different than our first pregnancies. I've been really enjoying getting into the every week we read about baby. That's been a really nice special bonding thing for us, at least for me, to find out. And it's not stuff that I don't know, but it's just it's good to be a normal parent. You know, it's good to be a normal dad. To buy the fetoscope. There's it looks like like a doctor's stethoscope, but it has a little bit longer bell to it and a little bit of handle, and to listen on mom's belly for heartbeats and things. Not hearing anything yet.
No, we can try.
Yeah,
we can keep trying.
Yeah. What are things that you've been doing? Have you done anything different?
I would say I've been more vocal about it. Like maybe not necessarily in this kind of platform, like through like maybe social media itself. And actually that's a lie though, because I have actually been called out on social media and I totally embraced it. Where I think when I was pregnant with Phoenix, there was, like we had talked about, that fear around, well, okay, that was a surprise. So what if this doesn't necessarily go as planned? And not only it would almost have felt like a double whammy of you're kind of surprising people with the surprise that you've gotten, but then you would also have to explain that the baby passed as well. And that just, I haven't really felt that. I've had several friends that have gone through miscarriages, and hearing how helpful it was for them to talk to other women about it, and then the way that it opened the avenue for them to find community in that as well. It's just made me wonder, since my first pregnancy, why would we not talk about it and still be able to celebrate the life that was, even if something happened to which that pregnancy didn't continue.
Yeah, our bodies are smart, and if things aren't right, the body recognizes that we should try maybe something else. It's something that when we're working with those parents who have gone through that loss repeatedly, a lot of times we're almost a last ditch effort to figure out what do we need to do, but there's some basics. We just actually talked to somebody who's a nutritionist who was talking about stress, and I can't imagine a bigger time of stress in my lifetime than the Great Pause. People out of work, people doing kid stuff. I'm finding it amazing that people are getting pregnant, let alone that. I mean, the births that we're seeing too are reflected. I've talked in other One Belly Wednesdays about the number of breaches, and we talked about the postpartum. We published a blog on our website about the increase in anxiety scores and depression scores that we're seeing in our moms postnatal. We know that stress is a factor for these kinds of things, and honestly, that's been one of the big things for Danielle and I too, is managing our stresses of what's happening, in our lives, what's happening with our practice, what's happening with the mood, all of that kind of stuff. And so I think for me, there's been two things that have helped. We both have, daily readers that we go through to help us kind of get grounded and understand the things that we have control over and things that we don't. Making sure that I'm in that has been very helpful for me, having that connection with my higher power. And the other thing has been thinking about a very simple affirmation from our friend Jay Warren, who really asks people to connect in with baby in a very simple way about talking to baby about being welcomed and wanted. And also when you have a break in the stress, to acknowledge it to baby, to say, this isn't going to be the permanent situation you're born into. That when we have these tense moments, we see the resolution of that, and this is what the resolution feels like. And I think for me too, that's also making me conscious about showing my affection and love, not just to you, but also to the baby, and being intentional with taking time to just with that silent heart energy and presence of talking to our baby. I've also been writing to our baby too on occasion, which has been
that's lovely. Yeah, that is lovely.
So last thing there when we celebrated our 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we celebrated 12 weeks, that was the same week that we got, was that the same week that we heard the baby's heartbeat?
It was right around
It was right around that time.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago, and I'll be 15
Yeah.
this week.
That was one of the coolest.
That was so cool. I mean, it's so worth it.
It really was. To hear that little 160 beats per minute, the little heartbeat go. It was
that
so,
helps to make it very
fun.
real too.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be some favorite moments in this, and just like everybody's, every couple's pregnancy, there's going to be hard times too. But I'm really looking forward to us both being able to share our journey through this process with couples. So, is there anything any last piece of advice for moms going through that first trimester, or couples going through that first trimester of managing things that you've done to help manage?
What probably was the most helpful for me, and I try to apply this in many areas of my life, even outside of pregnancy. So I really like to believe that we live in a very friendly world and a really friendly universe, and that things are happening for us, not necessarily to us. So that was something too that was helpful in just thinking about how uncomfortable I was and understanding that, even feeling nauseous and feeling really uncomfortable in my body, thinking about how that was happening for me and why that was still a friendly process and not necessarily just something that doesn't feel good. And you would remind me to talk to the baby about and to understand within myself, it was all temporary. Wasn't something that was going to last forever, even if it went past the first trimester, and just understanding that all does come to an end and it's all happening for us, even if it doesn't feel good all the time. I didn't always remember that.
Because we're human, right?
Yeah, because we're human, but that was a good thing to come back to.
Well, yeah, we're going to be, again, talking about this. We talk a lot about baby's first year. We talk a lot about pregnancy and One Belly Wednesdays. And so if you have friends, if you yourself are pregnant, we really encourage you to engage with us. We send these out every single week on Facebook. We have it also on our YouTube channel. Danielle's going to be taking over our Instagram page too. And so a lot of the content that you're going to be reading, research, that kind of stuff that we publish out of our office, she's going to be making all those infographics, etc. And she's also adjusting here too. So super excited to walk on this journey together. Thank you very much. You guys take care.